I'm David Rammel, editor of Virtualization and Cloud Review, and I'm moderating this session called Zero Trust Focused End User Training Tips, Tricks, and Pitfalls. It's presented by Greg Schultz, founder and IT analyst at Server Storage IO, an independent IT advisory, consultancy, and creative services firm. As a Microsoft MVP in cloud data center management and a 10-time VMware V expert, Greg brings a diverse background to his work as a consulting analyst with a real-world perspective across applications, data infrastructures, hardware, software, and clouds. He's also the author of several books. Greg, it's great to have you here. Please take it away.
Great. Thank you, David. Hello and welcome everyone to today's session, Zero Trust Focused End User Training, Tips, Tricks, and Pitfalls. I am Greg Schultz, as Dave mentioned in that nice introduction. And with that, let's just get right into it here. There's a lot we're going to go through here, but here's our agenda. What we're going to go through is just a real quick setting up the big picture, reviewing the Zero Trust, but what are the components, education and awareness, enabling zero trust, training tips and tasks, data protection for a zero trust environment, as well as best practices, tips, and recommendations. And a reminder, submit your questions as we go through. Just keep submitting the questions, and we'll have plenty of time at the end where we can dig into those. All right, so here's the thing. Everything is a perceived threat risk. Trust no one or nothing. Always verify. And it's getting more difficult today, especially with AI. In the previous session, we heard about how AI can be used, co-pilot as that assistant, that helper, that force multiplier, if you would, to be able to help protect and preserve your environment. And part of that is needed because the bad actors are also using AI to attack your organization, to attack you, your coworkers, in different ways. They're getting more creative, whether it's using AI to generate better scripts so that when they're talking and reading off these scripts, they do sound more realistic and convincing, or even using AI in nefarious ways to set up websites, URLs that look convincing, or even doing voice and video phishing to really convince you. So with all that being said, don't be scared, be prepared. Know what the threat risks are, know what the applicable threat risks are and their particular impact to your organization, which over there on that left, this is a basic building block approach of detect, defend, deflect, diagnose, but also be ready to protect your organization so if you are impacted. And if you are impacted, what are those different threats? But more importantly, what's applicable and what's the impact? Is something going to cause a complete loss of access, a loss of apps or data? Is it going to be partial loss or destruction, damage or corruption or compromise of your data, theft or exposure? But what to do? What to do? A lot of that is right here, right now, today, which is getting started or revisiting. And that is know the threats, know the applicable business impact, also to your apps and your data, how to detect, diagnose, defend. And that's using smart tools, automated tools, AI tools, among others, but also leveraging that automation for that flexible, faster recovery and testing, and have a plan and have it up to date. And as a part of that, that also means you should ask the question, oh, wait a minute, I thought we were going to talk about zero trust here. What we're talking about sounds a little bit more like overall data protection. Yeah, absolutely. Bingo. They are so commingled. And that's, again, where we have to be prepared. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's dig a little deeper here. So what I've got here is you could look at this as a puzzle, okay? This is a puzzle. Everyone and everything are threats. Everything and everyone are not the same. So why treat everything and everyone the same? Okay, so over there on the left there, we've got different threats. Traditional phishing. Vishing, and as I mentioned briefly a moment ago, vishing is looking at things in terms of video phishing, voice phishing, where it's even more convincing, where maybe you get that phone call and it's somebody saying who they are, and they really aren't who they say they are, but they sound more convincing. And maybe they've even gone that next step using AI of leveraging somebody's voice and leveraging their inflections, their tonal, and putting that in such a way that you're like, hey, wait a minute here. Is this really the CEO calling me in the middle of the day, telling me that he's about to go into an important meeting and that I need to unlock his account because he can't remember his password? What do you do? Do you sit there and say, well, yeah, of course I'll unlock it if you're the CEO. It sure sounds convincing. And then all of a sudden you unlock it for a nefarious actor. What do you do? Or do you say, well, excuse me right now, I need to go get my supervisor and we need to look into this for you. What's your callback number? Okay? That's not made up. This is happening. This is how the the bad actors are starting to do things. But what are they doing? What are they after? They want your credentials. They want not just your data to expose that. They want your credentials because you may not be the target of their attack. You might be the means to getting to somebody else. In other words, somebody wants to get your credentials so that maybe they can get to the CEO. That they want to get to something and do something even more nefarious. So certainly it's enabling malware, viruses, denial of service attacks, theft, ransomware, causing damage, destruction, chaos, mayhem, disrupting things. And it could be to attack your brand reputation, your organization, financial, among other things. And these attacks are attacking on-prem, at the edge, in the cloud, your different apps and services in different layers. Okay, over there on that right, those are the buzzwords, the buzz terms, if we want to play buzzword bingo. But these are the different pieces, technology, tools that come together. And part of this puzzle is putting all these different pieces together. Proactive management, penetration testing, your red teams, your blue teams, education, awareness, which we're going to talk more about here. There's certainly the technology tools and services, the AI, the automation, the co-pilots, as well as the apps, both your own apps, enterprise apps, SaaS, management, remediation, keeping them up to date. Then we have over there in the left middle, identity and access management, authentication, multi-factor authentication, two-factor, policies, processes, governance, management tools, alerts, and reportings, both detection but also diagnostics and remediation. Data protection and recovery, being able to go and recover when something does happen, that you've got a good copy of your data, whether it's a good snapshot, checkpoint, consistency point, a backup, whatever that happens to be, something that's interval time based and that you can recover. There's certainly device management, local and remote, conditional access with policies, your different networks, servers, apps, storage, logical and physical. So all these things have to come together in order to enable this zero trust environment, the zero trust paradigm and way of thinking and securing things. Okay, so real quick, what does zero trust mean in a nutshell? Simple. It's really, really simple. It's controlling the access based on who a user and what a device is authorized to access particular resources, i.e. devices, services, apps, and across your network, whether it be on-prem, edge, cloud. But also, and this is the important part, also along with identity verification and trust, e.g., in other words, is who or what they say they are authentic? Do they possess the valid current credentials to access different resources and services? Just because somebody says they're a CEO, are they really the CEO? Just because somebody says they're tech support, network support, security, that they need you to do something, are they really who they say they are? I mean, if a security person calls you and says, hey, look, we've got an issue. I need for you to reset something and do this for me. Okay? they should be able to authenticate themselves to you, okay? And they should not get upset if you challenge or question them. That's one of the ironic things about a zero trust is that if you're being told, particularly as an end user or working with end users, not to trust anybody, well, how are you going to, do you trust the CEO to really be the person who says they are, that you're going to authenticate, or that security is really calling you? You know what? And outside of the workplace, this is happening on social media. It's happening via direct messages, SMS text, and different things like that, where somebody calls up, says, or texts you, and, hi, this is Facebook safety, and we're going to disable your account. Click on this link. Don't do it. If anything, forward it to Facebook safety and management and let them come back to you and authenticate. So anyway, it all evolves around traditional security, data protection paradigms of the old world, trust but verify. Now it's verify before you can actually trust. Okay, so with that in mind, let's dig into this a little bit deeper, and let's talk about part of the end user training tips, tricks, and pitfalls is understanding the scope, understanding the paradigm, understanding the threat risks, what can happen, so that we can talk about how to prevent them and how to work around them and what to watch out for. All right, so this is a traditional perimeter-based access methodology, i.e. using VPNs. And VPNs have worked, okay? We're not going to dump on VPNs. We'll leave that for a different day, different discussion, whatever. They still have a role, but we want to be aware of what some of the pitfalls are. And the challenge with VPNs, real simply, is that it's like the castle. Once you get in across the moat, across the drawbridge, into the castle, there's the paradigm mindset that you're safe within the walls of the castle. But now are you free to roam about the castle? Well, that's a similar approach, is that if you can VPN into an environment, are you free to roam around? Are you free to get up and move about? Are you free to get up and explore? Or are there additional locked doors? Are there additional layers that you have to work your way through to be able to get access to different things? Now, graft that onto a cloud environment, particularly a hybrid cloud environment, which what we would have here is that once you're in, are you still subject to access controls to get, say, from the edge, from the main office into the cloud, from one cloud provider to the other? Do you have different layers, different rings, different perimeters of protection and different authentication? And are you able to authenticate more than just based off of a IP address? What other credentials are there? Do you have that ability to detect that, hey, Greg is logging in, and about a half hour ago, he logged in from Minneapolis, Minnesota, but all of a sudden now he's logging in from Tokyo, Japan. What's up with that? That's part where multi-factor, two-factor authentication comes in, where as I'm going in and accessing it, I get the alert. Here, I've got to enter in a code, or I get asked, is this really you? And I say, no, I'm still in Minneapolis. Somebody else in Tokyo is trying to use my credentials. Stop them, okay? So that's what we want to touch about real quickly, is where we've been and where we're going. We want to be able to have the authentication occur for different devices, different apps, different systems, different platforms, and with different granularity. And this also means allowing the access, allowing the credentials for the level of work that's applicable, versus just saying, yeah, everybody can have admin, super user, just to make your life easier. Okay, so now let's build out on this a little bit more. And again, this is to understand where these different issues are, so that we can train and we can apply different technology tools, tricks, and pitfalls to watch out for. Okay, so wherever you see the little red asterisk, those are threat risks. Those are points, those are places that things can happen. The little green are areas where we can leverage user and device and app identification, access authorizations, okay? So, and not coincidentally, wherever there's a red, there should be a green authentication mechanism. And there may also be additional layers of protection where there may not be a red threat risk, but for best practices, put in some additional authentication. So what this means now, instead of just simply granting, hey, you've got access, you're into the environment, you're free to roam about. No, as you go in further and go into different layers and go in and work your way through the environment, there needs to be that authentication, that identification that you can verify. One, that you can verify who somebody is and that they really are who they say they are, that the device really is authenticated, that they really have the access to what they need. Okay, so for example, IT staff, that they've got the authentication that they can get into the environment to do their support, to do their jobs, but that there's access controls not only around regular data, databases, SQLs, NoSQLs, et cetera, but also that there's protections around where log files, where dumps are stored. As we look back at some of the recent incidents, and this is part of training and awareness, is not only that something happened, but what was the postmortem? How did some of these attacks occur? Well, somebody was able to gain access and capture log files, dump files, and then use AI tools and find authentication and find credentials, find tokens and things like that. So this is where it gets back to, is protecting at the device, protecting the browser, the different tools that are used on the app, even if you're using virtual desktops, especially if you're using virtual desktops where things are moving around. Okay, so let's build a little bit more out on this. So we talked about the zero trust, some of the big picture things. Let's dig into this a little bit more and look at some of the components. Okay, so there's the tools, the techniques, the technologies, the best practices and awareness. Okay, so one of the key things is having those rings, those layers of defense, but also segmentation as well as microsegmentation. Thus, zero trust spans security, data protection, networking, server, storage management, applications. It's an encompassing topic. It's not just a security, not just a network, not just a firewall. It touches and spans across many different locations as well as up and down the stack. Okay, so part of that zero trust is having inside the walls, physical, virtual, additional granularity. Verifying that somebody is who they say they are, but also maintenance, applying timely maintenance and remediation of your systems, of your physical, of your virtual, of your containers, of your apps up and down the stack, but also of your remote devices, of your endpoints, making sure everything is up to date, both with software, but also with their policies for how they're managed. And also having that robust data protection, including backup, restore, snapshots, point-in-time copies. Okay, so some other aspects to this is that multifunction authentication, the two-factor authentication. And as you look at this, it's, well, yeah, it can be a pain at first. It can be a hassle at first. But once you get used to it and if you set it up, so for example, there's some things where I just have a thumbprint, or you could use an eye scan or something else that you don't have to type in your password all the time, where you don't have to type in a PIN, but you've got options there. But it's enabling it such that authenticate who you really are, is that who you say you are, so you can do some things. And yeah, it can add an extra step as part of that. But it's also making sure everything is safe. So get used to it. It's the way forward. Again, it's all about verifying someone or something is authorized. It's also part of that real-time monitoring, detection, alerting, and reporting, so that if somebody is trying to use your credentials, if somebody is trying to do something, that hopefully the automation, the AI, the co-pilots, different things like that, the smart tools could all of a sudden kick off a rule and say, okay, we've detected something. Now let's start our response. Let's take our action. Do we need to do anything else? And again, part of that is factoring in the geolocation considerations. As I mentioned, that example where a half hour ago, I'm working in Minneapolis. Now all of a sudden there's that alert that I'm working from a device in Tokyo. No, I get the notification. Are you in Tokyo? No, I'm still in Minneapolis. That's part of that geolocation awareness, that factoring in that context aware. So there's also this other part about awareness and education of users of not only the threat risks, but also what to do and not do. We're going to expand on that here in just a moment. But there's also, again, as I mentioned earlier, is spanning across on-prem, cloud, hybrid, in different layers. And as we see on the chart here, we've got the vertical up and down on the right, but we've also got the horizontal across the bottom, working across these different environments. All right. We've talked about talking about education awareness, so let's talk about it. It's a dangerous world. The threat risks are everywhere. As I mentioned, don't be scared, just be prepared. There are the challenges that we've talked about in the past of the rings, the layers, that we need additional verification, authentication. And here's the thing, when it really comes down to it, the zero trust environment, the zero trust paradigm, the zero trust approach should be a user and worker productivity and not a barrier. Okay, so we have to balance between zero trust for securing and locking down while enabling workers to get their work done, and do it in such a way where they don't have sticky notes with passwords written down, hidden in a drawer or something, that it needs to be productive and not a barrier. That zero trust should not cause workers to go out and find ways to circumvent security. And likewise, as a user or as a worker, things should be streamlined so that you can get your work done. All right. We touched on this one a little bit, and we're just going to move right by this and talk a little bit more about the education awareness. Okay, so attackers and bad actors are getting more sophisticated. As I mentioned a bit ago, they're using AI for the attacks, for their refining, their conversations and communications. And it used to be, and I used to comment on this all the time, is that until the attackers learn how to use a spell check, a grammar check, you could detect something just by looking at that. It was usually a tip-off that something was bad. Likewise, looking at a URL and say, this is obviously bad. It's getting trickier. I had a friend call up recently, and he was locked out of something. And I said, what'd you do? He said, well, this pop-up showed up, and it had the entity, the organization's logo. And he said it looked convincing, so I clicked on it. I said, don't do anything else. Here's what you're going to do. Walked him through some things to do, and all of a sudden, his computer was fine. He had run into something where he saw the logo. He was convinced, okay, this must be legitimate. This must be valid. Or when you see a URL that maybe it's coming from LinkedIn, spoofing that it's coming from LinkedIn, and you see it, and it really looks convincing, and you just happen to glance at the URL, and you see LinkedIn in the text of the URL, but then a long list of numbers ending up with something like nefariousspambot.com. That'd be a red flag to me. Now, that's where automation, that's where AI tools, smart tools, detection tools should come into play and be able to detect that one. That is a bad known address. This is a bad known threat, and they should be able to isolate that as a part of things. Or if you come across something, you flag it to help the tool learn. Organizations, banks, others up and down the stack, across different sectors, they've become very, very robust as well with their fraud detection, fraud management, expanding into phishing schemes. And I've had this work something doesn't look right, I'll call and talk to somebody at the bank or send them a message, and they're like, yeah, please send us the information. We appreciate it, okay? So you're seeing that more and more as a part of that. And again, it's not just the emails anymore. You'll get them in text messages, your SMSs, direct messages, where you're working on your smart device or a laptop, and maybe you happen to jump onto a social media or something else, or maybe even a Zoom or Teams, and all of a sudden you get a message, hey, click on this, it's urgent. Is it really legitimate? Is it who that person says they are? Is it really them? That's part of it. So again, it's more encompassing with a lot more impact. So as I mentioned, there is that authentication. There is that 2FA, MFA. There is that enabling remote device management, authentication, and so forth. But also the big part here is trust yet verify. If you're sending a DocuSign out to somebody where you need them to sign something, give them a heads up. Make sure that DocuSign has something to reflect on who it is that's actually sending it out. But let somebody know, you say, yeah, fine, I'm going to send you a DocuSign, or I'm going to send you this later today. I'm going to send you this next week. Okay, good. Because I get them where they come in, it's like a DocuSign. I'm like, I don't know this. I don't know about this invoice. I don't know about that. Looking at it, it's like, yep, this is a spam. Why am I sending an invoice to myself or something along those lines? So this is part of it where we can't just simply ignore and shut everything down. We also just have to be aware. Is it a hoax or not? Is somebody just testing to see what you can do, how you're going to respond or not? So we have to verify, is it a threat or not? The phone call. When somebody calls, are they trying to capture your voice to be able to use as part of another attack via an AI tool? Okay? So the downside to all of this is that it's really causing us to be suspicious. If we're not going to trust anything, we're going to be suspicious of everything. That in itself is not a good aspect to it. But the big but, however, is that we can't just simply fall into that trap of somebody says, I'm the director of the department, reset my account for me, here's the new PIN I want, without validating them. And they shouldn't get upset or call you on the carpet if you do so. That's, I guess, in a nutshell, part of what we're looking at. We can't ignore email. We can't ignore email. It is still the probably largest point of where attacks are coming in, attempted attacks. We have to be very, very careful with that. The other part to this is around social engineering. And again, social engineering is leveraging the different tools, technologies, but techniques to convince you to do something, whether it's coming via the email, the text, the vishing, a DocuSign, whatever it happens to be. And you know what? Hopefully this is common sense, but sometimes common sense things aren't so common. Don't leave devices unlocked and unattended when not in use, and especially in public places. Get in that habit where you got to go up and go do something for a few minutes. If you're in a private, secure environment, lock it. Lock the laptop, lock the tablet, lock the phone, whatever it is. Just lock it. Make sure that it's just something simple. It's an easy habit to get into. Set it up such that you can use a PIN or other quick access to get back to your work. But in public, don't just sit there and walk away while your laptop is sitting or your tablet is sitting on a table, even if it is logged out. Please don't do that. I walk around going through airports or in lobbies, whatever it is, and I see that, I'm like, oh, geez. Don't do it. If you see somebody else do it, say something, or take it up, especially if it's work-related. It's just something common sense, but we have to be careful with it. Okay, so what are some additional tips and tricks that we can look into? Okay, so we've got a couple of different things here. And a reminder to keep your questions coming in. What are your concerns? What are your challenges? What is your desired outcome? What is your timeline, your business mandate regulations? Has your organization already been attacked? Or have you been lucky and you're just taking all this in to be prepared, or because it's something nice to do on a Friday? What is it that you're trying to accomplish? Learn, research, talk with others, the vendors, the service providers, the consultants. But look also beyond the technology. Look also beyond the tools to the best practices, to the policies. In particular, when it comes to how you're going to configure those tools, configure those technologies and those services. Are you going to follow the vendor's best practices, recommendations, suggestions, or are you just going to open things up? Are you going to use these new things in old ways, or start changing how you use these different things? And keep in mind that the best zero trust strategy and plan is the one that fits your organization needs, i.e. what you've talked about. So the vendors, they become, they're really, really robust. And they're looking for ways to differentiate themselves. And part of that is providing solution guides, the best practices, templates, reference architectures, health checkers, co-pilots, the list goes on. Leverage those. Get others involved. If you're working on something with a zero trust, get others involved across your organization and get management support, and be able to explain things such that if you're the IT people working with end users, provide that information to the end users of why you're doing something. Why are you doing things in this particular way? Why are all these policies? Why are all these regulations? And why do you have to do all these things? Explain that. Likewise, provide to the end users how can they verify, how can they validate, how can they authenticate that it's somebody from IT or whoever that says who they are without causing a commotion. Likewise, is being able to have that back and forth, so to speak. So revisit and assess where and how encryption is being used, both at the core, at the edge, but on all your mobile devices, as well as when data is in flight. And assess your environment. How are you doing identity and access management today at these different locations? Revisit how you're using VPNs and other endpoint technologies. Okay, so policies, procedures. How well are they defined? Are they draconian, that they're going to be a barrier? Or do they protect things? Do they allow governance, allow your end users to be productive? Again, have that management buy-in that this is why you're doing it, and this is how you authenticate it. And ideally, there should be a policy that says somebody is not going to get in trouble if they challenge a higher up, a manager or some other person to authenticate who they are. There shouldn't be a backlash because you get a call from the CEO, and it really is the CEO, that they're jammed up, that they're in a problem, and you request to authenticate them, okay? There should not be a backlash. Will you get a gold star for the day? I don't know. But there shouldn't be a backlash. There shouldn't be that point and blame and shame sort of approach. That there should be some mechanism where the CEO has somebody walk into your office and say, it really is the CEO. I just authenticated. I'm authorizing it. I'm going to sit right here next to you. We're both going to handle that. And then after the fact, whatever that fallout is, it gets resolved. But if anything, maybe you get that call from the CEO saying, hey, I understand the situation. I appreciate what you did. We need to find a way to streamline. That's part of a cultural shift. That's a trick. And that's how to also avoid that pitfall, as opposed to having to explain to the CEO why you unlocked his account, and he's the CEO, he or she, is all upset because you unlocked their account and they got attacked. Okay? So part of that zero trust is also a cultural shift. Okay, so what are some other things we need to do? That education, that awareness. Boy, that really comes back to, from an end user, that they know what the threat risks are, or they hear about them, and it's not just okay, here's the long list of what's going to happen and what the bad actors are doing, but something that they can understand, they can relate, and whether that's more than just a pop-up that your email says it came from an external source. Ideally, you should have text messages if you're using those for work. This is coming from an external source. Different things that help you protect. So again, leverage automation, leverage that knowledge, secure your logs, secure your traces, dumps, your telemetry, your temporary and scratch areas, and make sure that your data protection, your backups are doing and working as they should be, and that everything is up to date, everything is current. Okay, so what about data protection for a zero trust environment? This comes back to that don't be scared, be prepared. Okay, so you've detected something, you've deflected it, or your technology has, okay? Now all of a sudden something was detected, but the rule hasn't kicked in, maybe it's not current yet, and something has gotten through. All right, now you've got to do a restore, you've got to do a restart or recover, something that starts with an R. Okay, so right off the bat, you need to verify that your data protection is actually working. Can something actually be restored? Can you bring a single file back? Can you bring back a single database table or an email box? Or do you have to bring everything back? Or in the course of bringing something back, is that going to cause a problem? Okay, and who's got access to those resources for doing a restore, a recovery, or rollback? Who's got access to those? How are they protected? So this means protecting those environments, but it also means testing them. It means testing not just, hey, can I recover a backup? Yep, it came back off of disk or tape or cloud, whatever. No, go a step further and verify, okay, it came back, it's on the disk, a solid state, whatever, and that not only is it there, but it can be accessed by the database. It can be accessed by the email system. It can be accessed by the document management system, whatever it is, so that you have application verification that things are working, as opposed to just saying, yep, it came back, check the box, let's go have lunch. End-to-end recovery, restoration, rollback testing, that's part of it, okay? Also, as I mentioned, who's authorized to access the very parts of the data protection? Can a user start a restore, and can the user designate where they want it to restore to, and is it actually authenticated or not? Again, this comes back to that authenticating who they are, that the data protection, the logs, the tools, the databases, that they're protected, they're encrypted, and that there's that identity access management to be able to take care of things, and that they're up-to-date software. This also means expanding from legacy old school 3-2-1 data protection, having 3 copies, at least on 2 different systems or devices, and at least one of those offline, off-site. Okay, new school 4-3-2-1 is adding another dimension, i.e. emphasizing that you have 4 or more copies or versions, and that there are at least 3 copies or versions. You can flip-flop, but it's putting emphasis around not just a copy, but also that point-in-time version. You might have 3 copies, but they're all corrupt, i.e. you want to have multiple versions. You want to have multiple versions, but you want to have a copy in case one of them gets deleted or corrupted, okay? But you want them on at least 2 or more different systems or devices or types of mediums, and at least one of them is offline, and that offline could be offline, local on-prem. It could be offline, off-site. It could be offline in the cloud. It could be on a different medium. It could be on disk. It could be on solid state. It could be on tape, whatever your preferences are. But it's around that whole idea of just adding another layer, another dimension, another aspect. Okay, real quick here, excuse me, we got to talk about data protection gaps, the good, the bad, the ugly. And real simply, air gaps are good, isolated access protections, i.e., that's that one offline. It just makes sure that somebody can't go and get access and simply delete your backups or your catalog. Time gaps are good. That's that interval of different recovery points, enabling your recovery point objective, whether it be with a backup or with a copy or a snapshot, a consistency point, a checkpoint. It's having that point in time. Now, the bad gaps are gaps in time where you missed a protection interval, gaps in coverage where backups ran, protection ran, snapshots ran, replication ran, but they didn't capture what they should have. And that ties right into gaps in consistency, which is, yeah, you've got data, but it's not consistent. Things are missing. Maybe parts of it are corrupt or parts of it are damaged. And then the ugly is when you go to recover, when you go to test, and what you thought was recoverable, there's missing copies, missing or damaged versions. Things are not what they're there. Not all the pieces are there because you just simply trusted that everything was okay. They weren't verified, and they weren't verified end-to-end. So those are a couple things to keep in mind and keep in perspective. All right, let's start to wrap up here. Don't be scared. Be prepared. Learn from other incidents. What happened? How were they attacked? Assess your environment. Use new and old things in new ways. Simply swapping out old and using things in the same way, well, guess what? It's the old way. Okay. Watch out for treating everything the same. And awareness, training, awareness, insight. What can happen? What's likely to happen? And what's the impact? And what can be done? How to detect if something is nefarious. Have that granular protection. Again, be prepared. Protect your data protection, your logs, your security, your certificates, your keys. All right. Got a couple more here real quick. Protect your devices. Authenticate, as well as your security and network protection at endpoints, all the way from your browsers and your apps on your mobile devices, all the way to the core. Make sure that they're all protected. Again, that user, worker, partner. Watch out for social engineering, phishing and vishing, voice phishing, tailgating, and different paths. Making sure your devices are logged out, that they're encrypted, that they're locked, and they're not just left out there in the open for somebody to leverage and use. And protect against theft or damage. All right, wrapping up, what can you do? Well, real simple. Everything and everyone is a threat risk. Understand what those threat risks are and their impact. Where are things, or how are people going to be attacked? How scalable is your current production? Can it scale? Are you simply relying on whatever the newest technology is, which today it's AI and Copilot, Chat GPT? Okay, great. Those are all fantastic, but what about somebody who's been able to do some social engineering and work their way around that using those same tools or their versions in nefarious ways? So that's what we have to watch out for. The technology is fantastic, but it's how they're used and what we're aware of. And again, work with your partners, your vendors, your service providers. Put together a vision, strategy, plan, how you're going to go about doing that. Where you're going to learn more, my books, my blog. I'm on Twitter. If you want to get in touch with me, but please, no spamming, no phishing attempts. And then we'll go from there. So with that, David, do we have some time for some Q&A?
We certainly do, and we have a lot of questions. And before we get to them, I'd like to remind the audience that we can take questions up until about 5 minutes at the top of the hour in order to give you a short break before the next session. So please send them on in now. And let's get to this big list of questions. Greg, if you want to follow along in the console, I know you addressed some of these, but in that case, you can just summarize and provide more context or new angles. So let's get started. The first question, what are some tips for outsourcing or using a managed service to handle your zero trust?
Yeah, good question. Is if you're simply going to, well, here, we're just going to have somebody else take care of it. Okay. Look into them and, one, what are their best practices? What are their templates? What are their guides for educating your end users, your partners, your clients, workers, whether they're knowledge workers, IT workers, whatever they happen to be, front of house, back of house. What do they have to be able to support all those? But the other thing is, what is their track record? What have they been showing up in the news? Have they been showing up in the news because others who rely on their services have been having issues, have been attacked? And this has come up recently. So part of that is you want to understand is, what are their safeguards? Okay, yeah, they're going to tell you we've never been attacked and we've got all these marquee logos, et cetera. But what is going to happen? And this comes back to going through and looking at some of the different postmortems, Dave.
Okay, next question came in early on. The question reads, do we have to swap out all of our hardware and software to enable zero trust?
All depends on what you're really doing. If you're just simply doing, like, say, a network refresh and you want to start enabling a zero trust environment, that might be part of your network upgrade, where you're replacing technology for other reasons. On the other hand, you may have existing technology that might need to be upgraded. Maybe some pieces might need point updates or point replacements, but that you can leverage a zero trust paradigm, a zero trust approach, that over time you do bring in some newer, different technology, whether it be hardware, software, cloud services, whatever. So I think the simple answer is zero trust should not have to require a complete rip and replace. You could certainly leverage it. But you also want to look at how can you leverage your existing as well as new technology in new ways, i.e. use it to implement a zero trust paradigm.
Okay, great. Next question reads, what are some common tricks to use to watch out for the tricks bad actors are using to get you to do something?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned it earlier, David, which is that the old approach classic was spelling, grammar, things like that were dead giveaways. It's become a lot tougher. Now you may have really nice grammar, really nice spelling, but things that I look at, whether it's in an email or a document or something else, or however it's being presented to me, is, does it make sense? Some of the AI tools are really, really good at correcting the grammar and the spell check, but they'll correct them in such a way that you're like, wait a minute, that doesn't sound right. And I don't know, maybe you've seen, like, even on like some TV or some other videos where somebody is reading a text and all of a sudden they're repeating certain things like multiple times, 2 sentences apart, verbatim. And it's like, what? Wait a minute. That doesn't make sense. Little things like that. Bigger picture, certainly still checking. I mean, hopefully you've got software that's picking up and detecting bad URLs, bad nefarious sites, addresses, things like that. But just before you click on something, take a time out, even if you just got to, just breathe in for a moment or just relax. Don't click on it right away until you're sure what you're about to click on or what you're about to respond to is really what somebody is or says they are.
Okay. Reminder to the audience, please send in any questions you have. We have about 5 minutes left. And Greg lives and breathes this stuff, so this is a great opportunity for someone to get some expert one-on-one discourse. And let's move right along. The question reads, what's the most important tip and what to watch out for with zero trust?
Well, I've said it several times, so it must be important. Don't be scared. Be prepared, okay? Verify someone, before you trust it. Just because somebody says, hi, this is Greg Schultz, and I need you to do this, verify that it is actually Greg Schultz. I don't mind somebody, when I'm calling in and you got to play the game, yeah, here's my information, here's et cetera, and, as a part of my authentication, I don't mind that, especially if I'm also validating who it is. When I get somebody calling up and saying, hey, we're so-and-so, by the way, what's your address? Oh, sorry, I just moved. I'm no longer at the address you're calling. All right. So if they know who you are, shouldn't they have your address already? It's almost like a little bit of common sense coming into play.
Okay. Well, last question. I know you touched on this, Greg, but the question is, can you explain the difference between 321 and 4321 backups along with air gaps? I mean, I know you explained that, but this question came in, and can you just summarize that and add some context?
Yeah, no worries, because you got different vendors running. It's 321 or it's 3.521. It's 3.75. Yeah. Okay. It's a really, really simple paradigm of you want to have multiple copies of multiple versions. Okay. And whether you want 4 versions or 4 copies, that's your choice. But the key point is that you have multiple versions, you have multiple copies of those versions, and that you have those entities on at least 2 or more different systems or devices or mediums. We're giving a lot of flexibility here. And at least one of those is off-site and preferably offline. Okay? That's the basic gist, because what you're doing is you're protecting against all your copies being corrupted or damaged because they backed up something wrong. But you also want to have those different versions and multiple copies of those versions so that you can recover from or to different time intervals. You want them on, say, 2 different backup systems or backup devices or locations, and you want at least one of those off-site, whether it's just outside of your building, whether it's somewhere local or in the cloud, but also preferably offline where somebody just can't easily get to it. Hopefully that makes sense.
Makes sense to me. Well, it looks like that's all the questions we have time for. So thanks again, Greg, for a great presentation and answering all of those questions.
No worries. My pleasure, Dave.